Okay, now we're entering the community storytelling part of the day, and I would like to read a story from Vera's second volume of her autobiography to start things off, Smiling Through Tears, Experience as a Nurse. This is a dream in forewarning. On August the 3rd, 1940, I dreamed I ascended a glass stairway with a large wind in it. I picked my steps cautiously for fear the glass would break. On reaching the top, I turned to the right to enter a room where a baby lay in a frilly blue bassinet. To my horror, the baby's clothes were soaked in bright red blood. Startled, I let out a cry as I awakened. John said, "If these cases are getting on your nerves, you should discontinue nursing." I told him that I felt this was a warning for me to take special precaution on my next case. 2 days later, I was called to William Coxon's on 16th of Elma, where a baby boy was delivered by Dr. Ty. To be on the safe side, I asked Cora if she had any powdered alum, just in case we needed it. On a top shelf in the pantry, I found a round tin containing what I had asked for. I awakened at 1:10 a.m., at which time something prompted me to look at the baby's binder. Sure enough, the bright red blood was just oozing through. I took the child to the kitchen table, turned up the wick of the coal lamp so I could see better to apply the powdered alum to the bleeding navel. I put a firm piece of cardboard over it and sewed a binder snugly on to keep it in place. All the while, I uttered a prayer under my breath for God to halt the flow of blood. The cord could not be tied closer to the body, and there was no telephone in the house to summon help. I watched the baby as diligently as a mother hen watches a chick. I felt relieved when I saw Dr. Ty come in the next morning, although there was no further sign of hemorrhage. He said he noticed a weak spot in the cord, but did not expect it to rupture. He commended me on my alertness. That was almost 85 years ago, and I am very happy to say that Vera's binding held. May I introduce Mr. John Coxon and his wife Marlene and daughter Wanda Lee Coxon. John was that baby. I'm very happy to have been able to meet with John and his beautiful family, to have coffee, and to spill the tea, telling stories about the county and about our lives, and to find out, of course, that we are related. And when I asked John what he thought about clairvoyance and psychic ability, he said, yes, I think we all have it, and I think we can choose to ignore it or we can explore it, but we all have it, and I happen to agree. Then John told me a Vera story, and because he's a natural storyteller, I would like John to share it with you too. Here you go, John.
Hi there. Hey, it reminds me many, many years ago, I had run for politician in Elma Township. And as a fact, I was the youngest man that ever was on council at that time. I was only 29. I still am. And Marlene says to me, well, I had to make a speech, and she said, well, just get up there and say what's coming into your head, and there was nothing coming. But there's a story I have about Vera. Vera was a very, very kind person, and she would nurse things back to health and stuff like that, and that was like her family. And by the way, their horses' names were Pride and Joy. And she would say things, you know, and she told me that there was a wild duck came into their yard, and it had been injured somewhat, and she nursed it back to health, and one thing and another, and the mama duck stayed there, and she actually mated with some of the barnyard ducks, and the kids off with them, but the two of them were too heavy to fly too far. And Vera said that mama duck would take off. There'd be a flock going overhead and she'd just take off and go down south with them. And the kids couldn't go because they were too heavy to fly. So in the spring, she'd come back in and dive into the barnyard and meet all the kids. And that was about the duck, and I thought that was pretty amazing for at that time. And it's only natural that they go south and stuff like this, but these other ones, they were too heavy to fly. That's the way I've been for a while. That's about the end of my story.
Thank you, John. I'd like to encourage anyone else who has a story who might like to share. Please, I happily share the link with you so that you can share with us. If not, you're going to have to hear me read.
Jana?
I do have a story. Okay. One of my friends in Wingham, who is a nurse, Barb Skid, she decided she was going to train in Newfoundland at Munn University. And so when she was out there, she met a gentleman and she really fell in love with him and she brought him back to Ontario. Well, he had never been off the island before, and he had that disease that if the Newfoundlanders leave the island, they get homesick and they kind of go crazy. And anyways, he took off on her, and she didn't know where he had gone. Well, she went to see Vera McNichol, and Vera said, he's in the psych ward in Montreal. So she had to go to Montreal and find him. So she rescued her Newfie boyfriend.
That's a direct message. Yes. Thank you.
This didn't happen to me, it happened to my sister many years ago. She had a habit of always taking her rings off at night. And she got up the next morning and her diamond ring was gone. And she had a little son, so she figured he has it and he's playing with it, she'd find it. No, time went by, she didn't find it. And so she went to Vera. And Vera said, you walk by it every day. Every day you walk by it and you will find it. So my sister walked up and down the garden path and everywhere looking. And a year or two later, she decided they were going to paint his bedroom. And you have to excuse me, I've got a cold. And she started painting, and the closet, it was an older home, had a raised floor in it. And there were 2 boards. And she's all set to start painting and sees something sparkly. And sure enough, they lifted the floorboards and there was the ring. And she walked by it every day.
Anyone else have a story for us?
Yeah, tell it.
No,
please.
Mars, you help tell.
It's funny.
You know, if I may, I just want to say, last time when we did this, you know, especially with what's going on in the world these days, like I walked away from the last one. I wasn't expecting the first section of this community kind of, you know, everybody sharing their stories, but I walked away going, you know, that was such much needed inclusivity and people coming together to kind of share joy and bliss on this, you know, cool subject that we're all interested in. And you know what? There's no judgment here. Like, it's not a performance. Like, it really is. I think you should share the story because it's joyful.
Hilarious. Well, it was like it was near the end. Like Vera was in
maybe about a year before she stopped giving readings. So I went to see her with my sister, and we waited all day. Like I said, you lined up, you never had an appointment. We waited all day. I was the last person. So I go in and I sit with her, and she goes, "Oh, honey," you know, she did the cards and all that. She was talking about this gentleman who had dark hair and a ladder, and he came from Sarnia area. She fell asleep. Well, I guess I don't have much of a future. So I waited a long time, almost to the point I thought, maybe I should just leave. And all of a sudden she was over, she goes, "Yeah, he's a fireman and he's not good for you." Oh, okay, here we go.
I'm glad you shared that.
The timing.
First of all, I'm going to say something, and if anybody went to see Vera McNichol or knows about Vera McNichol, you'll understand these next few words. Oh boys, oh boys, oh boys. Something that she always said when she was doing readings. I was fortunate enough to play the role of Vera McNichol in a local production in Millbank, which we performed on the riverbank, outside to crowds that were just beyond our expectations.
Fabulous.
Anyway, one night we were doing the performance and we had a little stage down by the riverbank. And as I sat in my chair and was reading stories to these people, telling them, reading their cards, doing whatever, this giant bullfrog came on the stage and sat right under my chair. I'm petrified. I am petrified of frogs. And I'm like, "Vera, I know that's you. Please don't touch me." Anyway, we finished the performance and the bullfrog stayed right there until the very end. And then when we all took our bow, we left.
Oh, wow.
We went to see Vera back in, it was early, about 1980 or 1981, and we slept in her driveway in a camper overnight to be the first ones there, and she's everything that people say, but a couple things stick in my mind, and John was alive then, and we were in there, and she would, even though we were there first, other people came in, and if they needed something, one lady came in to have her fat chanted away. So she chanted her fat, and so we got to sit through all that, and John would be up there looking out the window going, "What are those miserable bitches all coming to find out who their husbands are screwing around?" But she read our cards, and Brian, you've been married a couple years then, and our cards were the same exact. Like she read his and she read mine, and they were wow. And she said that and that and that. There'll be people tell you shouldn't be together, but you were meant to be together. And we've been married 50 years now.
Boy, let's gather around the well and find out who's sleeping with who. Thank you very much for those stories. Anyone else have something you'd like to share? Okay, I'm going to read a cute little story because I found it today. And I thought it was appropriate somehow. This is for little Marion Johnston, February 18th, 1952. Wherever you are, Marion, this is also for you again. The kitten went to church. No doubt you hear some funny tales about the long ago, but about the kitten going to church, I bet you do not know. So now I'll tell it to you, if you should wish to hear, how the little kitten went to church without the least of fear. It came right up the church steps and entered through the door, as though it were in the habit of coming here before. The congregation tried not to notice, but couldn't help but smile. Just see this little kitten come casually down the aisle. It caused some folks to giggle as it purred around their feet and arched its back so proudly while it rubbed against the seat. Everyone was in suspense to know what would come next. Their minds were on the kitten instead of on the text. At last it ventured further and was by the preacher's side. Then someone picked up courage and carried it outside. Thus the story ended, but still it puzzles me how the kitten went to church and made itself so free. For little Marion Johnston. That was so cute, you know. I think, and what I've wrestled a lot with during the making of this play is Vera's faith. And everything she did, including the time that my grandmother went to see her, was done in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. And, you know, in these times of waning sort of church-going, of faith, I think of Vera, who at the time was denounced by a preacher as she sat in the congregation and was told that she had the devil in her, all of those things. That preacher later came to visit her for a reading. Imagine the irony of all of that. But that was one of the things I couldn't help but think when I saw about this kitten, the wonder of the kitten, and that it did it so free. And it really those sort of things are what helped me to liberate my own biases against organized religion and how it can sometimes fall hard on those who live their truth. And so I wanted to read that, just to bring that energy into the room today. So thanks for listening. And I don't know, I thought, anyone know Marion Johnston? No. We'll maybe find someone later to say. Does anyone else have something you'd like to share? Yes.
May I, if there's a moment, may I just ask some questions, and maybe if anybody else has, and we could just see if we get anything. Okay, so the way this works is, as I said, if everyone can be just like as quiet as possible, any little like murmurs or, you know, if there's chuckles, that's fine in some way. But when I'm editing, sometimes it's hard to distinguish between what, you know, might be a whisper. But I'm just going to ask some questions and we'll leave a pause. And if anyone has, like, I want to speak directly to Vera and John. And see if we can actually get any responses, because they'd likely be here, I would imagine. But if anybody here thinks of a question, a burning question they want to ask, or not burning question, just raise your hand and you can ask a question too. To any unseen beings that are here with us right now, we don't mean you any harm or disrespect. We're just very curious to know if there's stuff going on that we can't perceive with our eyes and our ears. In particular, because we're here celebrating the life and times and works of Vera McNichol. Vera, if you're here, would you come forward and speak into this device? I'm certain you know how it works. Vera, what do you think about the fact that there's such a huge amount of people that love you and follow you and want to tell your stories? Vera or John, is there anybody in this crowd that you need to give a message to? Hear that ghost? I'm just joking. What's the message you need to pass on to them? Does anyone have any questions that they'd like to ask Vera that I can listen back to? No pressure. No? Oh? Do you have a question? Okay. You can if you want. Okay. All right. That's great. I'll listen back to that and see what we get.
Oh,
Oh, you got a question?
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, Vera. Stay here. Vera or John or Kelly's got a question.
Vera, were you trying to warn us about the weather event at the first time we gathered through that gentleman who told the story of his unexpectedly delayed wedding?
That just made me think too. Spoiler alert: we haven't officially announced anything, but there is the potential that a couple months from now, Vera, we may be holding group community ghost hunts here at the museum for those who are interested in giving it a try. Would you be able to come and join us for those when we do them? And what's more, would you be able to help bring people, or bring the unseen or spirits, for lack of a better term, would you be able to help facilitate bringing them here for those evenings, please? Great. Okay. Thank you.
Oh gosh, what have I done? That's fantastic.
Thank you. It's kind of like whale hunting. Well, you're going to get some answers. Some of the answers we've gotten are quite incredible in some of the investigations we've done. And we look forward to posting. After the last Vera session we had a couple of weeks ago, we did a session in the museum where we were picking up EVPs and we were getting messages. And so it was a very profound time. We connected a lot with names of people who were in the Perth Regiment upstairs. So it was very moving.
If I can just add to, for those of you who are interested, I'm presuming in a number of days from now or a week or so, there'll be an email to everybody from Kelly that's going to have a link to the YouTube channel, Folder 5 Paranormal, where the edited videos of all these sessions here at the museum will be put up. But I'm also going to do my best to get the evening investigation that Ron's referring to, that we did the night after the first reading. I think we were here till midnight or so, in the dark, with nothing going on. And we did like a proper full out location investigation. So that episode, among the other ones that are already there, will be up there as well if you're curious about the museum itself.
Does anyone else have a story they'd like to share? Yes. I'll bring the mic back to you.
Hi. I was raised in the lake, so Vera McNichol was a neighbor. Excuse me. And as a child, I just heard the kitten story made me want to share that Vera, I just remember her as pure joy. So as children, we didn't really know what Vera did. But we knew there were all these crazy people who parked outside the house. And we thought they were crazy because as kids, we could skip the line and go visit Vera anytime we wanted. So if we wanted to go Christmas caroling, or we wanted to just say hello, or we wanted to go trick-or-treating, which Halloween was a special treat with John, we could just walk past everybody and walk in. So for those of you who visited, there was a woodshed you had to pass through to get to the kitchen door. I don't know if that's how people got in that waited in line, but as kids, that's how we got in. So you would open the woodshed door, there were no lights and it was dark, and the kitchen door was on the far side. And the trick was to get to the kitchen door before you lost the light of the outside. The other trick was that John sat in that woodshed when he wasn't in his living room, and he loved scaring us. You know, kids love to be scared and then go back and be scared again. So we made numerous trips to Vera's, and once we got to the kitchen, she was just always so happy to see us, and you knew you were always welcome, and she just radiated joy. But the real fun was having John scare you on the way to the kitchen door.
How we doing? Good? I'm going to share a little bit of a story that happened last time in our first session. Jane Traxel was here. She is also a psychic. She has gifts and is related, I believe through marriage, through John, to Vera. Anyway, she inquired very early on in the session, are you missing any books from Vera's collection? And let me just say, Vera McNichol books on the internet right now are really quite pricey. There's one that I saw for $300 last night. So I do have most of them, I'm really grateful to say, but I said I've been having a hard time getting a book. Thankfully the museum had it and has lent it to me, and it's called Little Drops of Water. And she reached into her bag and she said, Vera told me to give this to you, and it was Little Drops of Water. So that was one of the special sort of links, as we've had many special links here today as well. So really grateful for all of those incredible signs, because I wasn't sure when I started off. What do I have to offer this story? You know, my grandmother went to see her twice. And so I knew that there was a connection there. And my grandmother was a very Lutheran Christian woman. You know, I would have thought that she hadn't believed in those things until she told me the stories of going to the charmer. So it was really fascinating to find out that from her. So yeah, all these little connections. Yes? Another? Amazing.
Since you mentioned it, in Millbank, Vera was she was super busy. She worked around the clock, but she was still a very avid community member. And one of the traditions in Millbank was when you got engaged, you got a community shower, which meant everybody contributed and they bought you a gift. Usually a vacuum or a card table and chairs were the popular gifts of the day when my mother was a young bride. And she's here with me today. And in the book is a poem that Vera wrote about her engagement that she read at a community shower. So if anyone's interested, it's on page 148. It's called Wishes by Telephone, because my mother was a telephone operator and supervisor before she got married.
Can I ask you to read it?
I don't think I can.
Would you like? Yes. Okay. Thank you. Do you mind if I do? Thank you.
Jane, would you like to read this?
Oh. Wishes by Telephone. Do you mind? Just give it a go.
Okay.
I think the consomme's ready.
Vera wants to share some of her consomme.
Full reading of Wishes by Telephone. There is a busy signal on the Nargang line. Oh, did I say that right?
Yes.
Cupid has dialed a number, which is a happy sign. We can't hear the conversation, but we know what it's about. All the neighbors are excited because the news is out. There is to be a wedding on the 2nd day of May. The bell is about to ring and Central's heart is gay. Instead of being supervisor of operators, short and tall, Mary Jane will henceforth keep Kenneth Crotts on call. Ken tied up all the wires when he gave her the ring. Mary Jane refused to listen to any other ding-a-ling. These two have been sweethearts, since in the primer book, no one else could get the line, the receiver was off the hook. Sometimes there was static along the rural line, but interference cleared away and everything went fine. There were no wrong numbers or information please, but they hung up on each other once in a while to tease. We need not call long distance to speak with Mary Jane. We may say hi in the morning and in the afternoon again. She has left the switchboard her home office to oversee. She will handle the rolling pin with the same efficiency. We are happy that you chose within our midst to dwell, and we assure you once again we will always wish you well. To express our loving wishes, these gifts to you we give. May the head operator bless you and give you long to live.
Consommé ready, Kelly?
Yes. Yes.
On the same time.
Sure.
Happy to take any more stories if anyone has something before we move on to our break, and then we'll have little slight readings from the play. Yes. Oh, sorry, here. Yes, great. Amazing.
Just a quick,
Of course.
it's kind of a question too. So my mother made a special trip when I was a child to meet Vera. My mom we lived in Walkerton. And I don't remember anything about her reading, but we have a book, a signed book, which was lovely, and I still have Smiling Through Tears that my mom got that day. But then later when I was a young teacher in Kincardine, in the early 80s, that's when Lois Hannah disappeared. And probably many of you know that story. And we never did find out what happened to Lois. And it just has always sort of haunted me because I was living in the same town that she lived in when she disappeared. And I believe that Vera was consulted on Lois Hannah's disappearance. Did you know that?
I did not know
Okay.
that, no.
Does anybody know anything about that? No? Okay.
I spoke to a friend of mine and he knows one of the relatives. I spoke to him 3 months ago and they know who the murderer is. He can't prove it and he's moved out of the province.
Wow. Thank you.
I too grew up beside Vera McNichol, just around the corner. So I remember all the cars lined up and as a young child, seeing people going in and out all the time. Not quite sure how I started this, but Vera used to collect me stamps. And I used to go back, and in the little driving shed at the back, you would go through, and just like the lady before me said, John would be back there. And he would go, who's there? And he would sound really gruff, and he would scare the crap out of me. But then he would look and see who it was, and he'd say, oh, Sherry, it's you, come on in. And he'd walk in, and and Vera would be in the middle of a reading. And he would go, that's okay, you can go in. So you would go in, and Vera would instantly hold your hand and just caress it, that you felt special at that moment, and it just you felt her energy. She was so kind and just a lovely soul. So I used to go back there quite often collecting these stamps, and it was interesting. I don't know if I could identify which stamps I got from her, but she had sometimes a bag full of them from people that she would collect. The other story I have is I had a brother that was born with some birth difficulties, so he never walked, talked. And he was sick a lot of the time. And my neighbor had asked Vera to come and charm him.
And charming it in those days was taking away some of the illness from the person that was sick that she would take upon herself, and then I understand clear it. And she looked into his palm and she seen 4.5 clouds pass in his palm. And she told me, neighbor, he will pass before he's 5. God will take him. And he did. Before he was 5, he passed away. So I myself, with a lot of other people, of course, know that Vera was the real deal. She was the kindest soul you've ever met. Excuse me. And John was gruff, but he had a heart of gold, because as soon as you got past that door, he was a kind guy. So that's how it was. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that beautiful story.
Thank you.
Yes, someone in the back.
I don't really have a story about Vera because I didn't know her or see her, but a few weeks ago I was hanging out at my parents' house, and I had remembered a long time ago my mom saying that we had someone in the family who was a psychic, and we came across, it somehow came up in conversation, and I asked her about it, and she said, yeah, her name's Vera, you should look her up online. So I did, and I came across this event right away, and I just felt like it was like meant to be that we were supposed to find out about this event and come here. And she was my grandpa's aunt, so I don't have any stories my grandpa has passed on, but I think my mom has a story. Years ago, many years ago, my grandmother, who was her sister-in-law, was quite ill, and we all gathered at the Blissful Hospital, and we were all going to say goodbye to my grandmother. And Vera came in, she goes, relax everybody, she's fine, it's not her time. So yeah, it was nice. So I always grew up knowing the stories of Vera. Charmed my cousin who had constant nosebleeds, so she was charmed to stop that. So yeah, she's always been in our life, but I never got to meet her. But I always knew about her.
That's amazing. I think we responded on email, didn't we? Yeah. I'm glad you're excited. Yeah, nice to meet you too. Thanks for coming.
Many years ago, I went to high school with 2 young men, the Tour brothers. And Vera was instrumental on finding one of the bodies of the boys. He had disappeared, and they were weeks without knowing where he was. But Vera and all the police find this young man who was in a web, and they would have never found him if it wasn't for her. That was quite a story at the time.
It was Wayne Demon that went to Vera. It was Wayne Demon that went to Vera and asked her about the tour boy, where he was, everything like that. And she said that you'll find him near a village or a town where there's water, and he's down deep in the ground. But his brother had murdered him and threw him in a well up behind Mitchell in the lagoon. So that's about all I know about that. But the guy's name was Wayne Deemer, that went and asked Vera about it.
Was he an OPP officer?
No.
Was he an OPP officer?
No. Just murdered guy that did yeah.
He probably took the information.
Thanks, John, and thank you for sharing that story. Someone who was here last time during the session that we had furthered that story that was Wayne and a couple of friends that when they finally did go to Vera, it had been a month or so had passed that they hadn't seen him. And that they met some other people at the bar that night and were talking about what could Vera could have possibly meant. And they finally got up to gumption after a couple of drinks to go to the well and shine the light down in the well. And they saw the boots of him upside down. He was chained to a transmission. Yeah.
Oh. So it wasn't done by itself?
No, it certainly wasn't. No. Not misadventure, that's for sure. He tried to blame one of his friends, actually, for the murder as well. So that's documented in Vera's books. And in some of the scrapbooks, too, you can see Vera was an incredible scrapbooker. So there are letters that she got, including one from Her Majesty, the Queen. And after sending some books to the Queen, there are a number of articles from the newspapers that she also scrapbooked. And so Kelly and I snowshoed into her home and Jane to get those books and bring them. So please feel free to have a look through. They're fascinating. And to think that she created them all with her hands. It's just great. Yes.
So those scrapbooks, they came from the auction sale. Dave and I went to the auction sale when Vera passed. And we were looking for Rosicrucian magazines, because she was a Rosicrucian. And anyways, we got there early and we were helping to pull things out of the house, and the Mennonites said, "Oh, you've come a long way from Palmerston." Anyways, we were bidding against this other lady for the Rosicrucian magazines, but we were able to get that. And that's where the scrapbooks came from, was that auction sale as well. And so anyways, and my friend Dave here, he's got her jam cupboard as well as signs. And then we brought one of the signs to donate today, and it says, "I'm not working on Sunday, come call again tomorrow, Vera." So you'll see it around here too.
Thank you so much. That's amazing. Oh, Kelly's got the sign right here. Amazing.
I could ask Jana a question.
Yeah.
So the two scrapbooks that were in the Hill House, they came from you originally?
And I gave them to Anne to do, because Anne Anglin performed as Vera McNichol.
That's right. Yeah.
Anne performed as Vera McNichol in Listowel when they did the play about the doors.
The flood.
Pardon?
The flood.
Yes, yes. And so she had got some information out of these scrapbooks, right?
Well, let me tell you something, because this is the people that Jana is talking about are Paul Thompson and Anne Anglin.
Yep.
Paul taught me everything I know about community stories, and Anne as well. And they were living in a place, really interesting place on the Maitland River, up near, well, between Brussels and Blythe and Wingham. That's a whole other story how they got it, but I ended up buying it from them, and I steward that place now. It's hard to get to in the winter because you have to get across the Maitland, and there's an old bridge there. So you never know if the river's going to be high or low. But I recall, like, Ron and I, we were planning this together, and I have gotten rid of every single book in that house, and there were a lot of books in the house because they were moldy, and Jane helped me multiple times, but there were two books that I just could not let go of, and they were these two scrapbooks. And I didn't really know why. I just thought, this has to do with Anne for sure, and I'm going to hang on to them. Well, I suddenly remembered they were there, so that's how we ended up, Jane and Ron and I, strapping on the snowshoes, and we got across the river, and I had a nervous moment where I couldn't find the books, but then we did find them, and we pulled them out. Ron looked at them, saw the letter from the Queen. They are over on the artifacts table. Now get this, I have to tell this story. Severin Thompson is their daughter. She's the artistic associate of the Blythe Festival, and so was here at the last event because she helped commission this play. And she walked over to that table, and she noticed, she said, do you see the page that's open, Kelly? And I looked at it, and it was at the very page, it was a newspaper article detailing the death of her uncle, Paul Thompson's father, and her grandfather and her uncle, who had died in a plane crash. They were from Atwood originally. And she said, Kelly, that's the announcement of my grandfather's death. So there's a bit of coincidence that you got the scrapbook, because I've seen other ones. The archives have some, but that was the very one meant for them. Yeah. Wow.
It's time for some consommé.
Yeah.